Okay, here I am, sat on a tunnel. 889 miles to go, says the sat nav. So it's a long drive. I'm on my own, so it's going to be a tough one. I'm heading down to Spain, where I'm going to go and meet Ditch Ballard, who used to work at Nash, but now helps run Ebro Mad Cats. So yeah, I went to the Ebro several times about 15 years ago, so it's going to be a bit of a trip down memory lane, and I'm looking forward to seeing my old pal Ditch, because I've been promising to go out there for the last few months. Finally made it happen. So yeah, see you on the other side. It was a massive drive, but with limited time I couldn't afford to waste any, and I drove hard, stopping only twice for fuel and the call of nature. I just about made it across the Pyrenees before dark, and by 9:30 I'd arrived in the sleepy Spanish town of Ribarroja, still feeling surprisingly fresh in spite of 16 hours on the road. Ditch was waiting to meet me at the village bar, and we drove to his place, where we'd be fishing the garden swims for the first couple of days.
People have gone before me, was that recording?
Yeah. In spite of the journey, it felt good to be back, and we were both keen to get some rods out and get fishing.
Yeah, I can picture how people have gone before.
The night passed uneventfully in terms of fish, but by morning it was clear that we would have our work cut out keeping the rods in the water. We were not fishing far out from the bank, no more than 40 yards, but there was a lot of weed coming down, suspended throughout the water column, and this was quickly building up on the lines and moving the leads. There were also entire weed beds the size of a car floating down, which was an instant wipeout. This first day would be a day to recover and catch up, and hopefully a carp or cat or two would be a bonus. With the weed making life difficult, by afternoon Ditch suggested we went and had a look at one of the sheltered bays, so we jumped in the van with minimal kit and we went exploring.
Yeah, this is the hydroelectric dam.
And what if you go up there, that goes to Mecanenza?
I think it's about 30 minutes as a boat goes, and about an hour in car.
Yeah. And then down here we've got
11 miles of faster flowing water. Obviously this holds back a lot of the current and a lot of the weed and stuff here anyway. Once you get up to Mecanenza it's flowing again because of the other rivers joining.
We stopped off at the dam and there was the odd fish to be seen, but there was nothing really worth hanging around for, so we carried on to the sheltered bay. It was a pleasant place to spend an hour, and I bagged a small bass on a lure and Ditch a perch.
Yeah!
That's a little bass. There he is, predation in miniature. Beautiful little Billy bigmouth bass. Back at the house, and with the weeds still coming down and the odd fish showing closer to the far bank, we decided to try another tack and fish from the boat. So we loaded up with a couple of carp rods, the lure gear, and headed out across the river. Mooring up amongst the thick weed, we spent a couple of pleasant hours afloat, albeit unsuccessful, before heading back to get the rods out again for the night in the garden. Once again, the strong wind blew the weed into our bank and ensured there was no rest, as each rod in turn eventually had to be repositioned. Even doubling the leads on the clip and fishing 12 ounces was not enough.
Definitely time to head off in search of pastures new in the morning. Somewhere where the grass is green. Not the rain.
By morning and still fishless, it was time for a move, and we decided to head up to Mekanenza, hoping conditions would be better there above the dam. Ready to roll? Where are we going then?
We're going to head upriver about an hour now to a town called Mekanenza. It's a pretty famous place on the Ebro. Hopefully it's the promised land for me and Ollie, so let's see how we get on.
A couple of days in the Ebro. I've got a school to settle. Not greedy. £30 coin would be nice.
Yeah, that's a realistic target.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Sweet. Last time I fished Mekanenza it was free once you had your regional fishing permit, but these days a daily permit is also required. With our tickets purchased from the local bar, we had a little tour of the town, checking out some of the spots. It was a Sunday, and as a result it was quite busy with Spanish anglers, but come early afternoon they were beginning to pack up and head home, leaving us with plenty of choice of swims. We opted to fish a spot called the Lay-by at the confluence between the Ebro and the Segre. Using the echo sounder, Ditch located areas in two different depths, 20 feet and 30 feet, dropping H-block markers, and we positioned 2 rods in each, with a spread of mega pellet mix, salted mega mix and good old sweetened maize to bulk it out.
Mixing up some different size pellets. We're going to pour some hot water on them, scald them up, and we're going to mould them around the lead, drop them over the side of the boat. So yeah, just a variety of different size pellets and some crumb, salmon fry crumb. And then just add some hot water. Don't want it sloppy, so you need to just add water little enough then. Let the pellets soak it up for 5 minutes. that is going to catch us a carp, big fat scaly Ebro carp.
Get the rods out.
Let's get the rods out.
The point where the muddy waters of the Segre meet the clear waters of the Ebro is one of the best areas to catch big carp and cats as they move from one to the other, and we would set our stall out for both, fishing rigs and bait that were subtle enough for the carp but strong enough to stand a chance of landing one of those big cats. Some well-earned cheesy puffs there, mate.
Cheesy puffs. Colourings and E-numbers for you, sir?
No, you're alright, bruv, thank you.
Rods are in position. We've seen a couple of carp show. I know it's been fishing well here. Can't do a lot else. We've just got to wait for some carp to pick up the bait and hopefully we'll start catching. Yeah, it's a pretty famous area. Join of two rivers is always bound to be good, but you've got so many different depths out there, and clean water of the Ebro, muddy water of the Segre. Prime position. If nothing else, it's a bloody beautiful place to sit for a few days.
Yeah, you ain't wrong there, mate. Once again, a stiff breeze picked up as the day wore on, and fishing at around 200 yards we were again faced with a constant battle to keep the rods in position due to that weed coming down. The odd carp would launch itself out around the markers, tantalising us, so they were there. Time and time again, Ditch doggedly rowed out to replace the rigs and to rebait. It was frustrating, but the only thing to do was to keep at it and ensure we were actually fishing with all the rods. Darkness fell and the moon rose, bathing the river in an ethereal light. At around 9 o'clock and completely out of the blue, the most recently replaced rod in the Segre waters was away. Making that old girl sing, isn't it?
So we're literally just thinking of giving it up for the night. We've been weeded out repeatedly, run the rods out about, what, 4 times since we've been here?
Yeah, you've been a soldier, Ditch, fair play.
Well, it's soul destroying, isn't it, mate? When you're not getting the takes, you're just getting weeded. And I think this might be a cat, you know.
I think this might be a cat, actually, yeah.
The way the take was initially was quite jingle-jangly. And now Ollie's getting a bit beasted. So £4.5 pound scope is doing the do, hooped right over.
I leant into it and it didn't take a genius to realise that this was a cat rather than a carp, as it headed off down the Ebro like a freight train. After the initial unstoppable run, I took no prisoners, piling on the pressure and trying to keep that fish moving back towards me. There were all sorts of underwater obstructions, drop-offs and boulders, any of which could bring the fight to a premature end, so I played it as hard as I dared, giving it the butt of the £4.5 pound scope. If I was going to lose this fish, it wouldn't be because I'd pussyfooted around. Luck was on my side though, as just 20 minutes later a large shape loomed up in the torchlight. Ditch was ready to glove it, and up close what we thought was 100 pounds had grown significantly. Ditch unhooked a tiny looking size 4 and got ready to bring it ashore as we weighed. It wasn't particularly fat, but it was well over 2 metres long, a proper river giant.
160. What are we going to go for? 164? 164. 164 down. Yeah, buddy. Have a bit of that.
Oh, well done.
Not bad on a carp rod, mate. Not bad on a carp rod.
Hoisted on the scales, it was bigger than we'd initially estimated, spinning the needle round to a PB busting 164 pound.
Okay, Smoke. Are you going to go on the head then?
No.
You that? No, you're going to...
It's a joint effort. Well, that's part of what we come from. That's all right.
You right then?
Cool.
And the tail might as well flip round.
We're a good. Well, that's about as good as we're going to get.
Yeah.
160 pound.
164. I fought every pound of it. Let's get it back in the water, mate. What a beast.
Come in the water with him. He's a big one. How long it is. I've caught many cats at neck and ends over the years, but never anything that big. Anyhow, the hard work had paid off, and against the odds, now I finally had my monster. At midnight we reeled in the rods, observing the fishing restrictions, and we set the alarm for 5 AM to get them back out again. The weed coming down the river continued to be a problem, even using 14 ounces of lead, meaning the rods frequently had to be repositioned with fresh bait over the top. We settled into a cycle of redoing the rods, Ditch insisting on rowing out the baits, keeping my recently injured leg away from the water, while I kept the line taut to prevent a bow forming in the strong wind and the current.
So yeah, first thing you probably notice about the rig we're using, it's quite long. Reason being we're fishing flowing water, obviously the Ebro River is moving, so find that all the weed that's been floating down and causing us many problems on this trip. But what normally happens is the weed will build up around the line and then the lead first. So you find a big clump of weed building up around the lead, and just that extra length to the rig itself means the hook is further away from that ball of weed, keeping you fishing a little bit longer. It's a simple knotless knotted rig, size 4 Fang X, and I just tie a little 2-turn grinner to the shank of the hook. Instead of using any tubing or anything, it just lasts a little bit longer. Tubing seems to get shredded a bit, so we've still got that little blowback, but it's robust basically. So it's a 35-pound combi link braided hook link, or coated braid. Again, it's pretty abrasion resistant. The coating gives me some extra confidence, and the inner braid's quite nice and supple. For a 35-pound braid, that's pretty skinny. So yeah, I've just stripped the hair itself and mounted a 22mm halibut and a 20mm boilie on the hair. Soak them in some halibut oil just for my special hook baits. These fish are quite pellet orientated, so yeah, I'm kind of multitasking basically with a really strong hook link. And if I do hook a cat, I've got half a chance of landing it. You sure landed your one, didn't you? It's a big cat on carp gear, but you got the strength to give it some beans, and hopefully land them, but of course it's fine enough and delicate enough, and certainly sharp enough for the carp as well. So yeah, keep it simple, but a few little changes to how you might fish in England, with the strong braid, big hook, big bait, and quite a long rig.
Fishing was uncharacteristically slow, perhaps killed by that drop in temperature and all that rain the previous week. Whatever, we were eventually rewarded after lunch for our persistence with another take on the same rod up the Segre, and it was Ditch's turn to do battle with a monster.
Woken up now, but he suddenly just realised it's hooked. It's bumped me hand.
Again, it was obvious that it was a catfish early on, and again, as the fight progressed, it grew, and it grew, and it grew. If mine was big, then this one was even bigger. With nothing Ditch could do with it other than persuade it towards him, the unseen monster decided it would head round the corner up the Ebro towards the dam. This spelt big trouble. There is a submerged road running parallel to the bank, complete with telegraph poles and numerous other snags, and we both feared the worst.
Bad, mate, I can feel judder in.
As soon as it started grating, we knew that fight would surely be over, and a few seconds later it was. .7010 leader cut clean.
Feel it there, mate. That's fishing.
We were both gutted. Nobody likes to lose them, but when bites are hard to come by, and it's quite obviously a giant, it's worse still. As night fell, the rods remained quiet, once again the moon illuminating the scene like daylight. At 11 o'clock, the longest rod, positioned in the waters of the Ebro, hooped over, and I joined battle. Although it was weighty, it wasn't pulling nearly as hard as the big cat the night previous. Perhaps I finally had a carp. To make life awkward, it picked up one of the other lines, so it was hard to tell how big the fish really was. But when it popped up in the torchlight, it was a carp, and it was a decent one at that.
What palaver! But we've got it!
We popped the fish in a sack, ready to photograph at the first line. On the scales, it went 34 pounds. It was mission accomplished.
Well, it's been really tough down at Mechadenza. Ditch tried his little heart out, and we did eventually have a carp. Had a couple of cats as well. It's a real Ebro character, and a right result. Paid off all the hard work, eh?
Very welcome carp, that one. Never worked so hard for an Ebro carp.
decided to move on from Meckie and head back to Ribarocca for the final day. We stopped off for a couple of hours on the way back, chancing a large bay that was sheltered from the wind and the weed. This spot could also be prolific, but the carp were really not playing ball this trip and we didn't stay for long, soon finding ourselves back in the comfort of Ditch's garden. Thankfully there was less weed than previously, and at dusk we once again set the carp and cat rods for the final few hours, hoping for some last minute action. I had to leave at 5 AM by the very latest in order not to miss my crossing the following evening, and so we tried to have an early night. But the fish had other plans. At midnight, one of the rods went into meltdown.
Just flung a few rods out and Ollie's gone to get a few hours sleep before the mammoth journey home. As soon as you get into the sleeping bag, one of the rods rips off. Seen a few crashing today, probably more than any other day. So, good to see one on the end of a line. That's a nice one.
Well done, mate.
Looking full as well, that fish, really plump.
Oh, I don't think he's quite there.
£29.
£29.
Sweet, that'll do me. It's a nice gesture to finish on. Oh, yeah. Brilliant. It's been a tough few days, isn't it, mate? But we've worked through.
Yeah, come on, let's get in the picture. Come on, Dave.
Yeah, brilliant times. It's a nice way to finish a brilliant session on the river with a good friend. We've got ourselves a nice upper 20 common to end on. Let's get her back in the water and see if we can get one more, which would be real cheeky.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It was Ditch's take and he duly landed a £29 common. No sooner had I nodded off and another rod was away. This time it was my turn to bank a £29 common. The Ebro had sent us a farewell brace. And so it was still dark when I dragged myself out of bed, loaded the last of the kit and woke Ditch up to say goodbye and thank you. It hadn't been the easiest of sessions, the conditions and the fishing had been tough, but we'd made the best of it and we'd had a great crack and banked a big cat and 3 decent carp, including the 30 that I'd come back for. It had been good to fish with my old mate again too, and I vowed that I'd come and see him again. With 1,000 miles ahead of me, it was time to put pedal to the metal.
Let's play it